All right, we're live. Welcome, everybody, especially to our Sightlines audience, our subscribers to Good Beer Hunting's Sightlines community, full of insights, analysis, and as you'll see here, a lot of interaction between different kinds of decision makers working at all levels of the beverage alcohol industry. And very often, as in this case, kind of focusing in on the smaller brewing segment in the U.S. As a place where a lot of things are happening right now and changing pretty dramatically. And today we're going to be talking about distribution in 2021. Distribution in the role of beer in America, if you look back at the entire arc of it, is largely unchanged for the most part. Three-tier laws are old. The way in which beer gets to market is old. But in the last few years, things have changed dramatically and seem to be accelerating state by state. And we're starting to have a national conversation around some of those things. And the two people that you're going to meet today, Rob Burns of NightShift and Collin McDonell of HenHouse, I think are on the forefront of what some of those changes are. And a lot of what you're probably going to hear today has to do with the context that the pandemic has put us all in. Not that it's sort of forced new things into the market, but it's kind of accelerated a lot of ongoing sort of discussions or changes that have been desirable for a long time to the forefront. And so we're going to talk about how some of those things are maybe kind of newly at the, I would say, kind of relevant to what distribution looks like in 2021, what's changed, what has not changed, and where small producers and decision makers at small producers can be looking to help make better, smarter, more strategic decisions about their own plans for distribution in the coming years. So, as usual, I am flanked here by Kate Burnett, our reporter on Sightlines, and Brian Roth, our editor of Sightlines. Welcome, guys. Appreciate you joining me.
Hi.
Brian, I know this was something that has been on your mind for a little while. I know that we all pay attention to what Collin is doing at HenHouse because he tells us all about it all the time anyway. If you're not following Collin McDonell on Twitter, he has long been a bit of an oracle, I would say, into the mindset of what small producers and small distributors, because he also distributes, are constantly thinking about and asking questions about. And I think he proposes some provocative kind of positions on the industry that way. And Brian, I know for you, NightShift has been sort of emblematic of some shifts that you've seen happening in the industry for a few years now. And you've reported a lot about some of their bigger moves in recent years on Sightlines. What is it for anybody who maybe hasn't been following some of those developments? What are some of the things that you've been paying attention to that kind of came together into this overall desire to get these folks together and have a chat about it?
Yeah, Rob, I'm going to make you blush. Rob's just a really smart guy. I think what has been very interesting to me as a reporter following the industry is that when we've looked at both the micro and macro trends, one of the consistent businesses that is running parallel, this is going back a couple of years now even, has been Rob and his team at NightShift. Very smart in terms of the way that they've approached their portfolio and kind of following trends and being flexible in terms of following consumer demand and interest. But then also the unique situation of NightShift distributing and kind of offering this more catered, craft-specific distribution company that has brought on a host of different brands and many different kinds of beverage alcohol options. And I think that's also what led me to seek out Rob and Collin to join us for this chat. And so, Rob, after I build you up, I will toss things over to you. For all of the ways that things have changed in the past, 14, 15 months, which we've covered extensively in Sightlines, looking at the need for distribution, the impact in grocery stores, the benefit of convenience stores, direct to consumer. All of these things have kind of been front of mind for subscribers and your peers in the industry. But at this moment, as we're a quarter into 2021, what are some of the things that are front of mind for you when you think about distribution right now?
Yeah, great question. I think more than ever, things are shifting, and I feel like we're sort of standing on a quicksand flooring. There's a lot of exciting things happening, but we're going up against some pretty tough comps from last year with pantry loading. So numbers are looking all over the place. Like they're up, they're down, but like, are they really that down? Like, you know, if you look at them to 2019, they're up. So like, is that good? Is that bad? You know, I think the last few weeks we've been up like 3,000% year over year on draft sales to restaurants. Well, that sounds pretty awesome. But well, we sold, you know, $1,000 that week in 2020. So, you know, 1,000% isn't that much in the grand scheme of things. You know, is that shift as people move on back to the on-premise? Will the off-premise numbers keep up? Probably not. Data doesn't support that. You know, people can only drink so much responsibly. As Collin takes a sip, I appreciate that, Collin. Do your part. And so like, are we going to still win on occasions as people go back to the tap room? You know, I think we saw a lot of our core beers really take off last year and do really well. But now is, you know, maybe specialty and one-offs and tap room, you know, going back to the tap room in a meaningful way, gonna shift that, and people are gonna look for new again. Are they shopping longer in the store and trying different products versus just grabbing whatever and getting out of the store as fast as possible? So I think that's some of the things. And then certainly, like, you know, hard seltzer, you know, not to hopefully make this a whole talk about hard seltzer, but certainly, you know, that's putting pressure, I feel like, on all of us as to like keep high velocity store products in the chain stores. Like, you know, it's getting harder and harder to, even if you are a successful craft brand, to maintain that shelf set when hard seltzers are so on fire and stealing that shelf space. So kind of defending our turf, I think, is a kind of a big kind of, I say, the next 9 months or so of what our distro team is focused on. I don't know. That's a whole bunch of things. I can dive in any direction.
I mean, in terms of, I mean, it's being focused on the distribution side as much as you are a producer. How do you feel that pressure differently as a producer than you do as someone who's helping distribute brands themselves?
I mean, like from the wholesale side, as NightShift distributing, you know, the chain stores and grocery stores are saying, you guys got to give us even better service. You know, the Molson Coors Blood Houses, they're in our store twice a week. Why are you only in once a week? You know, so that's putting pressure on my team and requiring me to bolster up our force in the market. And then from a brewery side, it's certainly, you know, what can we get in there? You know, are we adding things, or are we just kind of swapping out? What's being incremental versus kind of substitutive? I think we're seeing a little bit of that in our own portfolio, where accounts are saying like, we're going to switch out this new thing for that new thing. And it's like, oh, damn, well, we're not going to grow if you guys just, you know, swap one for one unless the sales velocity is significantly higher. So those are some of the things that are kind of front of mind right now.
Rob, we'll start with you and then we'll kick it over to Collin, because you had said that there is kind of it's difficult to maybe determine what's good or bad right now when we look at it compared to 2020. But maybe another way to think about that question of good or bad is with all of the variables like hard seltzer and RTDs and all that you're talking about, like, what is a win? So like, as someone who is thinking about these things in real time as they're shifting, these 9 months are going to be really pivotal. Like, what do you consider a win today?
A win as far as like a brand or a product, or just like a general, like, high five in the sales team type win?
Well, let's think about it in terms of maybe with that distribution marketplace. So when you think about maybe that packaged product, where we're talking about maybe it's not necessarily just going like, okay, we'll swap one in, one out like you asked for, or maybe we're able to just claw and hang on to that extra SKU spot because hard seltzer is right up against us. Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of things that could change very fast for producers. And so when we think about wins, I'm curious where that takes you.
I mean, I think the one thing that I love about being a distribution company is we have so many sort of irons in the fire, whether it be products that NightShift Brewing makes as a supplier or ones that we sell on our behalf. For example, we distribute out Athletic Brewing in Massachusetts, the non-alc beer brand. And it's just on fire for us. And NightShift Brewing doesn't have any plans or aspirations to sell a non-alcoholic beer, but get to participate in that category. We get to win. We get to learn. We get to build displays for them, and it's been a hell of a ride with that type of brand. So I think that's one of our big wins. I think just we're certainly struggling with just like the amount of craft breweries out there that last year just kind of like all of a sudden needed distribution help, and like we would love to help them, and we certainly don't want to like shut people out of the marketplace, so to speak. But if it's just another hazy New England IPA or a pastry stout, like I don't care that you sell 100 cases out of your tap room every week, but like what's different about it? What's the price point? Who's the audience? And trying to find that kind of niches that speak to something that we don't already have. So I think we're always being pretty mindful of that tail and making sure our team is focused and picking the winners.
Following up on that, to follow up on a couple of points that Rob said. The first is just like looking at the past year and kind of thinking about like how do we compare and like how does this data kind of track. The one I have in my head that I try and use to make decisions is any trend that was accelerated by a pandemic is going to stay, and anything that any trend that took a U-turn during the pandemic will course correct. So the ones that got accelerated, I'm not really like trying to second guess those numbers. Like for us, can sales, right? Like we got way ahead last year on can sales versus where we thought we'd be projected. I'm not anticipating that going down. It's not going to grow as fast as it did last year, but I'm not anticipating it going down because it kind of accelerated a trend that was already going in that direction for us. Draft sales, like sales to restaurants, because it was a really serious U-turn during the pandemic. Like one, I'm anticipating it coming back. So like last year is kind of not helpful data. But two, that's the data that's like hard to determine exactly how it's going to pan out in the future. So like that's kind of the way that I'm thinking about that is the stuff that the pandemic reversed is really, really hard to project out for 2021 and 2022. The stuff that was accelerated by the pandemic is probably pretty consistent, if not like maybe a little up or a little down on what you did last year. So those are kind of like the general frameworks of how I'm thinking about those things. In terms of how that translates to like what's a win right now, the metric we always thought about as a not just a small brewery but a small distributor is average invoice size, right? And like for us, that's becoming more and more crucial is like making sure that average invoice size is growing, right? That helps you with that one-to-one swap out, right? In terms of like people consistently buying things from you, but just buying different stuff and not actually growing your relationship with them as a purveyor. So we're really, really attuned to that right now. That's one of the ones we're really trying to incentivize our sales team on is like growing that average invoice size. And then, like we pivot, we were starting this pivot going into the pandemic, but in the pandemic, we super accelerated it. The majority of our non-HenHouse sales is all burst distribution now. So we're not supporting a ton of people consistently. We have some partners that we work with all year round who are great. And kind of as we bring in new partners, we're being very explicit that, the goal is to hold no inventory, sell out as quickly as possible. Like we're seeing great effect with that, both in terms of like how that handles our financials. Like inventory turn is great. We're not building a ton of inventory, which is great. But we're also seeing a lot of like brand success for that. Like the breweries that we're bringing in like that are getting really good feedback from how that interacts in the marketplace. And I think that that's one of the trends that the pandemic may have accelerated is people are kind of all over the place in terms of what they want to try, what they want to buy, like lots of new things is exciting and fun. And so treating distribution the same way that most breweries treat IPA releases, makes a lot of sense for where the consumer is at right now. And so we're trying to kind of like, treat distribution like we treat IPA releases, like something new every week.
So Rob and Collin, something I'm hearing both of you talk about is sort of the distinction between existing brands that you're working with as distributors, and as Rob had mentioned, keeping those high velocity brands going, but also being pretty picky with your new partners. And something I've been hearing from small producers that I'm talking to who are suddenly seeking distribution, or that's suddenly more important to them. I think a lot of them are struggling to make their case and to show their potential without sort of a chicken and an egg. Like, they don't have the distribution sales to make the case with data. So I'm curious, Rob, you spoke about, having a different niche. Can you expand on what a niche is, or what makes a good partner, and how they can bring data to support that if they're not already in distribution?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly tricky, and I don't know if it's a pleasure or joy, but I get to sit on both sides of the table. Like, NightShift is a larger brewery. I think, we're a top 100 craft brewery in the country, but we're still struggling to make our pitches in other states to wholesalers who want to carry our brand. They're like, why? Who cares? Who cares about all these great products you have and great price points and great branding and your Instagram followers? Who cares? And so I certainly empathize with them, but like, I'm also like, you got to kind of defend the brands I have in the book, and I want to do right by them. And just gumming up the works with more products doesn't really solve like anybody. Well, the people that have been with me from the start necessarily move the business forward, doesn't necessarily, in my mind, help all the retailers that were supposedly, helping them with their businesses. So just being really mindful of like that whole thing. And, I don't really enjoy being a gatekeeper myself, because I know how hard it is to start a brewery and what it means. And you kind of just need to give, you need to get your shot out there. And I think, just how like we started, we were, home brewers. We weren't sophisticated business people. We didn't have a lot of money backing us. We didn't have a lot of experience. We didn't know anything. There's a lot of like kind of, I don't mean in a negative like way, but like unsympathetic, not very savvy beverage people trying to get their product into wholesale. And that's certainly even like challenge, because now we're moving 100 miles an hour and then trying to teach somebody about the beverage industry and like what it means to get into a chain store and all this sort of stuff. It's like, well, now the burden's like extra on us, and then I'm generating only a tiny bit of revenue. We start talking about like the P&L of that individual supplier in our book. Like, if we're spending all this time helping you just like learn the alcohol industry, and I only sell, $1,000 a week, I'm losing money working with you, where I can, focus my attention elsewhere and actually generate profit.
Yeah, I mean, both you and Collin are in a unique position of being producers and distributors, which is why I thought it was really great to get both of you connected on this, because I think you're doing a similar model, but at very different scales. Collin, when you think about how you go about evaluating bringing on a partner on the distribution side, what do you think you might be looking for that maybe you're better attuned to because of your producer side than a traditional distributor might when it comes to those conversations, those potential partnerships? Like, are there things that you think you are better attuned to or looking for that are slightly different than a traditional distributor? Or I guess I wonder if there's just sort of like a vocabulary connection, or maybe the data only goes so far for you, or maybe there's just a different way of evaluating those partnerships.
I mean, yeah, like I said, like we're in moving more and more towards burst distribution, we're really aligning ourselves much more with how breweries want to make beer in 2021 than with how distributors want to sell beer, right? We're like, and a lot of the reason we did that is because we were like, well, this is what we're good at, and we can do this for you. If you want your like one SKU in Rayleigh's all year round, like, you could probably find somebody better than us to do that for you. If you want to unload 4 pallets in the market, like once in a while and just keep it fresh and keep people excited about it, like we know how to do that, and we know how to do it really, really well, right? That's like our whole rotating IPA program. So a lot of it for us, like our most successful burst partners, absolutely, it's about them kind of understanding that like we're a tool for them to one, just like get a nice big invoice out the door once in a while. 2, keep things really, really taut in their market, right? Like we're a tool for them to keep their home market like super, super fresh and super, super taut, keep velocity really, really high there. And then, like we're the quality people, like nobody's going to care for beer in transit like another brewery will, right? We're 100% cold chain. We deliver into cold boxes. The delivery team, like is accustomed to the standards we put on our own beer, and we extend that to everyone we work with.
Yeah, like one of the things I've been hearing more and more from, I think, as small producers consider distribution, I'm hearing people talk about the potential for carve-outs for self-distribution more than they ever have in the past. And that strikes me as maybe like one of those things that only another producer would really respect on the same terms as another producer, that a traditional distributor would only see as lost opportunity or potential conflict in the channel or something along those lines.
So, sorry, Rob, I got a quick one on this.
We have a bunch of carve-outs too, but go ahead.
So this is my one, is that I think this would be my distributor hat talking about the brewery side. I think a lot of small breweries have never done a real analysis of how much money they make on self-distribution, and that they probably lose money on it, or at best, like break even. And that it's awesome marketing for their tasting rooms. Like, I think that the vast majority of breweries on a financial basis would probably be better served through a distributor, and on a marketing basis would really suffer working through a distributor rather than self-distributing. I think the people need to go a lot further in scale than they think they need to actually make money in self-distribution. And it's hard to do that analysis with a small brewery when you don't have, like an accounting staff of 4. So like, I think people overlook it because on a simplistic level, it probably looks a lot better than selling to a distributor. But if you actually take the all-in cost, willing to bet most breweries lose money on self-distribution.
Yeah, what were you going to say, Rob?
Yeah, I was going to say, we do have some carve-outs of breweries that self-distribute in Massachusetts, and it's what they want. They think they can do it better locally, right around their kind of center of orbit, and it's not necessarily what we love to have from our perspective. We'd much rather have, the whole state, but it can work. But I do also often have the same conversation that Collin says, like, how are you really justifying, like, instead of hiring a driver, why don't you hire a salesperson? And what would that do? Like, we already own, 10 trucks. Why are you driving a little van around, dropping off 2 cases per store? I just know from my experience, I mean, we started delivering out of the back of my Subaru. Like, once I didn't have to do that myself and I hired somebody else to do that, like, that freed me up to run my business better and find out other revenue streams, which just kind of started compounding. And is it the best use of time? And at least in Massachusetts, accounts don't have up to 60 days to pay. So it's another challenge it's one challenge to get the sale, deliver the product. It's a whole another challenge to get paid for it in Massachusetts. And as a small guy, that's even more burdensome when you're looking 60 days down the road to get paid, versus when they work with somebody like us, they get paid guaranteed no matter what. If we get collected for that end of the point sales. I
guess I see sort of like an increase in focus or curiosity around things like carve-outs as part of a large set of things that they're helping me understand that small producers are starting to consider more of the nuances of the opportunity for distribution than ever before. And I guess I'm curious, going into 2021, after so many small brewers have gone into package for the first time ever, have pitched a grocery store chain 5 years before they ever thought they probably would. They started doing direct sales. Maybe some of them started to doing DTC through the mail. Like all of these, their operation for getting beer into the market is now like a hydra compared to like the tiny little channel they had going through their tap room that was dense and profitable. There's a lot more curiosity than ever before about what those opportunities and paths to market look like, which I think, in some cases, I think it might be making them highly attuned to the different opportunities, but it also could be making them sort of informed to a dangerous degree, that they're going to take on more complexity than maybe they should have. But I guess based on your own experience as producers and as distributors of some of these other smaller brands, like what do you think going into 2021, the priority of producers and how that aligns with the priorities of distribution? Like, are they more aligned than ever before, or are they moving apart, or is it just getting weirder and more complicated?
Weirder and more complicated.
Yeah.
So like, I think you have to look at both sides of it, right? Like there are a lot of we talk about financial success in terms of islands of sanity, right? Like you're on an island, you're walking across it, right? You're growing, you're getting a little bit bigger, and you're fine because you're still on the island. But there's a certain point at which you grow off of the island, and then you're swimming, right? And when you're swimming, you can't stop growing. You have to keep growing or you drown until you get to the next island, right? And maybe the next island's a little bit bigger, right? And you can like grow a lot more on that island before it stops making sense again. And I think what the pandemic did is pushed a lot of people off the shore. Like they had a plan to go somewhere, but you have to grow into it. And the really, really scary thing about swimming between islands is you don't actually know how far it is, right? Like when you, generally speaking, like I think the bigger we get, the more we plan, and the better we get at estimating those distances that we need to grow for things to make sense again. But there's always an amount of guesstimation in that, right? And I think there are a lot of folks who stepped into that are probably still swimming, and that like kind of got forced into that decision. That's the like rough side of it, right? Is that like I think there are a lot of folks who like are now committed to growth that they're not entirely sure how that all pans out in a long sense. The upside is I think people have also realized there's a lot more opportunity for small breweries than they thought there was. Like our core product is a weekly rotating IPA, right? Like it changes every single week. That's like crazy rotation that even 3 years ago, like giant chains like Safeway and 7-Eleven would tell me they wouldn't do. And now we sell really well in both of those places, right? Like there's a level of sophistication you need to be able to deal with those large chains. You need to have someone who speaks their language, who is dedicated to that, who understands what customer service looks like for a large corporation. But like, we have insane freshness standards on our cans. Our hoppy beer has a 28-day shelf life, and you can get 8-day-old Stoked at any 7-Eleven in Sonoma County, right? Like that's an opportunity that we probably didn't think existed 3 years ago. And in the pandemic, it's been great. It's been like they've been super supportive, and the growth has been really, really good. So hopefully, the flip side of people kind of like getting into that like you have to keep growing mode is that they're realizing there's a lot more opportunity than they probably thought there was.
Yeah, that was something that struck me in the past year, especially when I would have conversations with others looking at IRI data, which, in many cases is geared toward, up until last year, some of the largest producers in the country. But a significant amount of growth came from small producers last year because there was opportunity that was brought to them because out of stocks or just shopping needs, the velocity of things was moving really fast. When you say, Collin, that there's a chance for everyone, is that chance predicated on an IPA or a hard seltzer?
Yes. Next question. No. Okay. So this is a really, really big one for us. And I think it's particularly relevant in wholesale. Like in the tasting rooms, I don't think it's quite as necessary. But when you get out into the distro world, I think it's very, very important. IPAs have been kind of the thing with the natural tailwinds, right? And like, just slap IPA on the label, it does better than it would if it didn't say IPA. And so all the creative energy has been going there. And I think if people stopped and took the same amount of creative energy they do making a new IPA every single week and put that into their wit beer, their milk stout, their pale ale, you'll find that people actually love those styles and really, really want to drink them. They just need the same brand support that we all give to our IPAs. So I don't think those other like any style besides IPA is impossible. I just think that given that IPA has the natural tailwinds, for most people, it's an easier return on investment to put that creative energy behind an IPA than to put it behind something else.
Gotcha. We have a question from one of our viewers that I think is kind of akin to that, but it's specifically about NightShift. Chase Brooks is asking, I wonder how the new Nightlight, Limelight, Night Heavy family has changed distribution strategy for NightShift and how that might influence your distribution strategy for all of your partners as well.
I mean, well, so I think sometimes we think about products coming from the distro business. Like, what does the distro team need to be more effective and be better? And then can the brewery create it, or can we find a supplier to fill those needs? And getting a light beer was something that definitely started in the tap room, but also really solved a problem. I'll call it a problem on the distro side of just like how to keep trucks full, how to get a lower price thing that was accessible to more accounts, so that we could get our products into more locations, who maybe didn't want, $18 4-packs on the shelves. There's a type of account for that, but there's also, the neighborhood bodega that's just going to rot back there. And so can we get something lower price that allows us to get a deeper penetration kind of into the Massachusetts account landscape? And so that's been pretty successful for us. I mean, in 2019, it was our best-selling product family, the Night franchise. 2020, it fell to, I think, number 3. But a lot of that was, we lost a ton of draft sales, and we were pretty competitively priced against, benchmarking against Michelob Ultra and Corona Draft and stuff like that. So without that, it's been a little bit of a struggle. I think for our other partners, the benefit is really that we have a broader account base. It also gives us something else to sell in that we're not like, I think we usually have probably about 50 different IPAs we're selling at any given day. And to go tackle something that's a different line, not only so we're not cannibalizing our own book of business, but we can not have to always fight for that one IPA. Well, the 30 or 40% of the handles that are typically IPAs, we can fight for something else and win there. And I mean, Limelight is a pretty good example of a nice crushable beer that's a little bit different. Night Heavy, we launched during the pandemic, and we haven't had a ton of success with. It's been selling, but we didn't get to do sampling and tastings like that we would have gone heavy on. We didn't get to do on-premise events that we had planned. So it's like, I think for us, that product is one of a few that we're like, did we miss the mark on the product? Did we miss the mark on the branding? Did we miss the mark on the liquid? Or was it just unfortunate timing and maybe it needs to like retire for a little bit and come back from the bench at a later date?
Yeah.
To put Collin and Rob, to put your distributor hats back on for a moment, Collin, perhaps your most repeated mantra is asking people to take responsibility for their beer.
Yep.
I'm curious, what's an unexpected way each of you has seen one of your partner suppliers take responsibility for their product in a way that is perhaps different than what people assume taking responsibility means?
So I'll throw this out there just because I was surprised by the fact that I was surprised by this. We work with Crowns and Hops Brewing out of Inglewood, who are phenomenal people making phenomenal beer. Super, super excited about everything that they're doing. And they use the phone better than any of our other partners. They literally just like, they take a sales list and they call everybody. How is the beer? Did you like it? Like, you know, like, thank you so much for buying it. Like, how are people reacting to it? Like, where did you put it in the store? They just ask those questions. And literally just that process of them calling, one, lets the customer know that they give a shit, you know, like that they're like paying attention. Two, it makes the customer like go like, oh, like, hey, they're taking this really seriously. Maybe I should take this seriously. Maybe this should be in a better location. Maybe I should be telling more people about it. You know, like, working with sales forces of largely millennials, I get to talk shit about millennials because I am one. So my people have like a crazy aversion to phone calls, and they're so effective. They're so effective. You know, like the follow-up email does not have that impact. The like call the store and talk to who's working right then, that works, and like has a great effect. So like for me, the answer to that would be like Crowns and Hops really like taking responsibility for making sure that they do that calling, that they do that connection with the retailer, and just like be something beyond just you know, a product that is bought.
Do you just get like a day off after you make all those calls for like anxiety, like decompression? Like, how do you handle the phone call tax on people's emotional states having to do that?
But that's their responsibility, not mine.
I would say, Kate, one of the things that I feel like young suppliers need to learn is like the sale isn't done when you sold the product to us, to NightShift Distributing. It's still your problem. It's not both of our problems, but it's still your problems if the beer's in my warehouse for like too long. And we need to work collaboratively as a partnership to figure out why we can't get it out. And I think too often we heard, well, you bought it, it's your problem. Like, it's like, no. Like, okay, something's wrong. Like it's the wrong beer, it's the wrong time, year, whatever. Help us sell it, help us get it out. We'll learn from it and iterate. And then on the phone calling thing, one of the things we did do on the distro side too was launch like an inside telesales team. And that's gone really well. I mean, it's certainly not something that my personality would thrive on either, Michael, but you know, these guys are calling 100 people a day. And I mean, they're generating like 20 grand plus of sales every week by just sitting at home and dialing for dollars. And you know, they're putting a little pressure on our street reps because they're sometimes getting bigger order sizes and generate almost comparable sales without, you know, that extra special hand selling. And we've taken some accounts that were kind of low level, you know, like what we would call like a C-level account that doesn't move that much product and turned them into B-level accounts by just simply calling them and touching base with them.
It brings up a major issue I think that we were facing pre-pandemic was that some distributors were moving to sort of like, you know, no feet on the street scenarios. They were moving to, you know, you go to a website, you punch it in or you use the app or whatever. And there were a lot of retailers that I think felt dismissed by that they weren't important enough to have somebody pop in, show new stuff, have a conversation, sample out, things like that. But up against these other factors, which are maybe bigger macro factors of people not wanting to, you know, they don't have time to talk to every self-distributing brewery in the country. You know, they can't fit all their meetings into a Tuesday morning anymore. They're more adept to use technology than they are to have long-winded conversations with people. That feels like a burden. Half of them probably feel like they already know what they want to order and they would just like a more efficient way of getting it. There's a lot of macro factors happening socially and within the industry that do indicate that seems like a natural course for the future. And it sounds like from what you're saying, it's actually proved to be more lucrative from a sales perspective. People are buying more through these systems than they were if you know, in some of the cases where you have an in-person sales rep stopping in.
Yeah, I think we were really nervous at first about accounts feeling like they weren't important enough to get that in-person visit. And maybe it is just the combination of the pandemic and everything, but there was a few people that were upset by it. And then we said, okay, fine. You know, we'll still visit you in person. Not a big deal. But it's also freed up our account managers to focus on, you know, the higher volume, the more needy accounts, the ones that need that white glove service. And then have the telesales team who can call, you know, 400 or 500 accounts in a week. You know, all of a sudden, you know, we kind of get to grow the sales force, get to grow the count touches per week without adding a ton of bodies and payroll. So it's been a great win-win.
I will say something that I feel like is a radical statement, that balance matters. I think like we've all gone in so hard in one or the other, where there have been conversations that I've had with retailers over the last 12, 18 months where it's there's something great in convenience, but then, everyone always talks about that, everything's built on relationships. And so that I would hear from people about how it's convenient that they can go on because they know they need these 3 things that sell really well so they can order in the online platform. But then they physically see a human being, once a week or once every couple weeks. And it's funny to now hear both of you talk about maybe what that rediscovery of balance means, when maybe it's something that's digital, but it's not fully removing the human element, where something as strange as a phone call seems like a radical outreach of compassion almost.
So doing the let's look at it from 10,000 foot level and then we'll get closer thing, right? Like the 2 things that distributors are inherently better at than breweries are is delivery and accounts receivable. Right, like billing and delivery always make more sense in a consolidated fashion, right? Like people pay their bills on time better when 75 to 100% of their product comes from the supplier than they do when one handle out of 25 does, right? You are a more important part of that person's business, so they're likely to pay better attention and they're going to pay their bills on time. Similarly, like trucks make sense when they're 100% full. No truck makes sense 25% full. And so like distributors kind of naturally have both of those advantages. On the sales front, distributors don't really have a natural advantage, right? Like, yeah, they got a big book and like maybe they can solve a lot of problems, but that's not necessarily what an account wants from them, right? Like maybe they do just want them to solve these 3 products, right? And they're going to buy the same amount of beer from you, whether you have 100 SKUs or 3 SKUs, because they only care about the 3. So you get into this situation where breweries do the thing where they can actually, like self-distributing breweries in particular, do the thing where they compete on what they can actually compete on, which is customer service. And it goes too far, when we started, really doing the self-distribution thing 5-6 years ago, it was all about like, how many accounts can you be in every single day, right? Like you have to be there, you have to show up, they have to see your face, they will buy from you for that. And now we're at a point where like everybody does that. And so like accounts are starting to do the thing where they're like, hey, I'm annoyed with how frequently you come here. Like I have other shit to do. I can't just spend all my time buying beer. I have to also run a bar. And like you say, you get to that point of balance where now we have like a lot of accounts where we're like, hey, like let's have one really in-depth discussion about like what our portfolio looks like, how we provide services, how I'm going to communicate with you, what you want on just an allocation, and it's just going to show up every week, every other week, whatever schedule you need. And then let me not talk to you for a while. And people are like, wow, I'm really glad you took an hour and a half of my time today and then none of my time next week. I really appreciate that. And you're going to swing back and forth between that, because what will happen is that'll work for a while. And then at a certain point, people will be like, I don't feel like I'm special to you and you need to show up. So it is about finding that balance point. Absolutely.
I think part of what you're saying kind of fits into a macro trend that I've seen with even some of our clients on the studio side, where their retail partners are starting to, especially the smaller restaurants, bars, are starting to think almost in subscription terms. We're so used as a society now to locking in a frequency, whether it's Amazon Prime or Harry's Shave Club or whatever. Like we're just used to getting stuff on a regular basis, adjusting it as we go, and otherwise like just recouping and reclaiming that cognitive load and not having to think about it anymore. And I'm starting to see that filter into conversations with buying of alcohol as well.
Absolutely. I think like a lot of folks, there was a point at which there was like a really significant part of the bar employee world that would take the ability to choose beers over a raise, right? And then what choices were being made became really important, because that was the responsibility that was given, right? You had a beer buyer. That was their job. It was super important. And I think two things happened. Is one, employees realized it's better to get raises than what beers are on tap. And employers realized that suppliers are more than happy to make this super easy, and you don't need somebody 40 hours a week to pick what's on tap. And so I do think we've kind of gotten to a place where people are listen, these are kind of the parameters that I need for the beers that are on tap here, the beers that are on shelf here. And I just want you to take care of this much of it, right? If you fuck up, I'm going to pay a lot more attention. But as long as you deliver quality product, I'm happy to just these are your three handles, and you tell me what's on tap.
Yep.
It comes to my attention that it has been at least 20 minutes since we said the word seltzer. So I need to. I need to stop the alarm bell from ringing. So I want to talk about not just seltzer, but the encroachment potentially of RTDs, whether we want to call that spirits-based RTDs, malt-based RTDs. I think I've spoken to spirits-based RTD producers who are going with beer wholesalers in certain places because they want that hands-on cans merchandising, and they know they can get those kind of daily check-ins on their product in a way that spirits is not used to doing. Is it fair to see RTDs as potentially an opportunity for beer distributors and a threat to beer producers, or is that too simplistic? How are you both reading it?
I mean, I think it's definitely a threat in a sense. I mean, I think, like Jim Cook is talking about, it's nice that they have higher taxes and that we don't have price equivalency. It's good because they have a lot more profit to spend on advertising, and, the number of high noon umbrellas in our market is crazy. I think there's probably more high noon than any single brand right now. I think we're certainly worried about, as a distribution company and as a brewery, of the shift of kind of that share of throat to more spirits-based products, and how are we set up for the long term. I mean, at NightShift, we talk about, building a company that can last 100 years. And, if the trends continue, we're going to be having a smaller and smaller slice. I mean, I think we have 2% of our distro revenue is wine and spirits based right now. There's a big goal to try to get that to double digits as soon as possible, which is in and of itself a big challenge. It's a different buyer, it's a different velocity, it's a different cadence, it's a different competitive landscape, different legal rules about what you can and can't do. So a huge learning curve for us, but we figure we got to learn now while we can, and try to get ahead of it. But I think it is something that we're worried about as beer maybe falls out of favor with the next generation. I don't think beer is ever going away, and certainly still, being in this business 9+ years, it's still my drink of choice. But I might be in the minority now as I age up.
Well, I mean, you've basically just described a threat and an opportunity that you're trying to balance simultaneously within your own house.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious as to any kind of pressure you're getting from your own suppliers on the distro side who want to venture into that space. I mean, you're basically being forced. Your hand as a distributor is being forced into that space one way or another, because you have partners on that side who need to leverage their supply chain, and you're that supply chain.
Yeah, I mean, right now we only have 3 spirit brands and a handful of wines, so we don't do a lot of it, but we do have 2 local spirit brands that are doing pretty well for us. So it's a great opportunity to kind of learn and kind of take advantage of that shift. None of them right now have RTD cocktails because, I mean, canning lines, it's for a lot of these small distilleries, it's another huge expense for them that they're not set up and they were never optimized, and it wasn't in the business plan to do packaged product like that. And then on the brewery side, it's easier just to make a malt-based, or sugar-based beer versus making a cocktail. You don't need a whole nother license, and it's like, a whole nother learning curve as well from the manufacturing side. So there's a couple I feel like hurdles with our current partnerships right now, but we're certainly actively looking for more. That's kind of some of the white space that we have in our book of like, hey, what can we do in the RTD space? What suppliers are out there?
Yeah, Collin, are you guys selling any seltzer yet? You talking to any breweries about seltzer? Are you not taking calls about seltzer very intentionally? What's going on with you?
So we brewed our pilot batch of seltzer. Did not enjoy that. That didn't get sold. I like seltzer. Seltzer is super fucking fun. But I do think there's an important part of being a self-distributing brewery, and even more so being a distributor, which is just being able to 100% deliver on what you're promising, right? Like so much of sales is just trust building. It's just and like particularly kind of that last question about like a subscription model. It's so much about trust. And so for us, we've talked to a couple of seltzer brands about distributing for them. Looked into doing wine and spirits, but I feel pretty strongly that we are able to really, really excellently deliver on fresh beer, rotational beer, fun beer. And I'm a little bit hesitant to complicate that proposition. Like, I want people to trust that, like, if someone from HenHouse comes in, they're going to have excellent beer. They're going to have a lot of knowledge about it. It's going to be fresh, and we will get it to you cold.
That brings up a good point. I mean, your messaging on the distro side is very, very much beer focused versus distribution or logistics focused. We actually had a question from Jesse Friedman on our YouTube comments asking if you could talk more about how you do the 8 day old stoked. Are you rotating stock weekly? Like, how are you accomplishing that? Because I guess to your point, what you're saying right now is to bring in a non-beer product that is not taking advantage of your key differentiators that you're pitching constantly, potentially could undermine what your value proposition is as a distributor to the people that are in your network.
Hey, and Collin, could you also explain what that is? What 8 day stoked is? What we mean by that?
I think it's I mean, it speaks for itself, Brian.
Well, for those who may be out in California,
stoked is a beer. Let's start there.
So, I don't feel like I get enough credit for discovering Jesse Friedman, and I'm glad that he asked the question. So, to the point, Stoked is our pale ale. It's a rotating hop pale ale. We change the hop in it once a quarter. It's a fun educational thing for folks. The way that we get it into stores that fresh is, one, you just have to have incredibly close coordination between your production team, your logistics team, and your sales team, right? We refer to that as the game of telephone, right? And that game of telephone gets bigger and bigger the more those teams are separated. So that's like one of the primary frictions of working through a distributor is that game of telephone between the production team, the logistics team, and the sales team, right? Because in the distributor relationship, it's not three categories. It's the brewery production team, the brewery logistics team, the distributor logistics team, the brewery sales team, and the distributor sales team. So you have a 5-step process instead of a 3-step process. That's one of the big challenges. For us internally, there's like a lot of that coordination that allows us to package a beer on Monday and have it on shelves on Friday. When we work with other breweries, how we try and dovetail on that is the burst distribution thing, right? We're not trying to do this for you every single week of the year, right? We're going to do it for you over these 3 weeks. You're going to plan out in advance what we're going to get. We know when it shows up in the warehouse, and we can tell our customers when it'll be there. So, Ruse Brewing up in Portland is an awesome example of a partner who really understands this and really does well. They kind of get a sense of when they might be getting a little ahead of what Portland can soak up for them. And they'll be like, hey guys, in 2 or 3 batches, we're going to have a little bit of an excess of beer. We want to send you 3 pallets. This is what's going to be on those pallets, and this is when you can expect it. And then we get to go to our customers a couple weeks in advance and be like, hey, Ruse is awesome, making super fresh beer. We're getting pallets on these days. What do you want? And generally speaking, we get to pre-sale most of that. Most of our burst distribution partners don't have open sales windows. We have the majority of that beer pre-sold. And what that means is Ruse packages on a Friday, ships to us on a Monday, we get it on the shelves on a Friday. So like it is a lot of legwork compared to a traditional distribution model. But if you focus on that communication and focus on making it work that way, once everybody learns the rhythm, it's really direct to make it happen. Like traditional distributors value those placements so much that like they're not willing to do that legwork for a product that they know is going to run out after 3 or 4 days of sales. For us, we've never had the assumption that we get to hold on to placements. And so our whole sales strategy is about like re-earning those placements every single week.
I mean, talking about pre-selling, I think that kind of connects to some of those factors we were talking about that led us to the term subscription as well. Is it seems like the smaller brewers who are more and more successful at self-distribution or just supporting distribution partnerships in general are getting better at communicating ahead of a product's release. So they're not having to do so much tight window selling as they have in the past. Rob, I'm curious in a footprint the size of yours, how important some of that like preemptive communication has gotten, and how hard was it for you guys to really institutionalize that kind of communication?
I mean, on our end nowadays, we don't do too much preemptive, like, small batch selling. I mean, we definitely we get to distribute like Alchemist, Heady Topper when it comes to market. That certainly is heavy pre-sold, and it needs to be in and out the same few days it comes in. We definitely pre-sale some of our, now our pre-sales for at least like some of the NightShift stuff is like, okay, we're trying to sell in, a 20 or 40 or even 100 case display. And we're trying to figure out how to win that floor space ahead of time, schedule it, find it, figure out how to be the brewery of the month type thing where we're building, big presence in retailers. So it's less about limited, but more about building like kind of big stacks of core. Which is kind of more of a new for us thing over the last maybe like 2 years or so, as we've kind of put brands out there that are meant to be like, stacked.
Well, I mean, a lot of what you're describing, both of you, I think, is about building trust that allows you to sell without having to walk in and describe a new product and taste it out while it's already in the market, and like that window of time is closing on you. You need to build up a pattern and a trust and a sort of rapport with people over time that allows you to sell in quite differently, which gives you better sort of, I guess, estimation of what the market looks like for whether it's your brand or somebody else's. I know we're down to the last couple of minutes here. Thinking ahead at 2021, like what's going on with people and what they're probably, where their heads are at right now as small producers. Is there one thing that you think people probably need to be more mindful of than they're currently being based on the conversations you're having with your own partners or the resistance you are experiencing in the market in certain ways or unpredictability? Like what's the one thing you think should be top of mind for people that you think maybe isn't getting enough attention right now?
I mean, there's so much coming at us. Raw material, can shortage, it's coming from all different angles. Seltzer, RTDs. I mean, we talked about a bunch of it. I think one of the current challenges just in our market, I'm sure it's not too similar, is that the shelves got a lot more crowded over the pandemic as all these brewers that, used to sell nearly 100% of their product out of their own front doors are now shipping it across all different states.
And they're all hoping it's going to be incremental growth locked in for the long term, like Collin's describing.
Yeah, I think that's maybe something I would caution everybody, NightShift Brewing included, that, what was gained is maybe not permanent. And I'm sure some of the business models are to bring it back. I mean, like, using Alchemist again, they're like, we don't think we'll send anything out of state for the next 6 months because we're going to sell it all on our front doors now. And we're like, okay, great for you guys.
Nice to know you.
Yeah, sucks for me, but great for you guys. But they're going to make more money doing that. It's going to be better for their business. They have more control over it. No fault, to them at all.
All right.
that's great. But that at the same time, that also frees up the shelf for something else to be there. And when that person was going to buy that 1 4-pack, now it's a chance of something that we get to sell more year round on there. So I almost feel like maybe we're in some sort of an accordion kind of period. Like shelves got really wild, out of control with all these crazy, never before seen in the market beers. Now maybe it's going to go away. Some of them are going to go back to taproom only. I don't know what the shelf is going to look like by the end of the year. But
what about you, Collin?
I think the thing every brewery should be mindful of is how they are connecting with their consumers. I think over the past year with the pandemic, folks staying home, they just literally had more time to connect with breweries, right? Like you had people who had more time to just go look at your Instagram page, go watch your videos, like to read the can copy, the people had more time to do all of that. And I think that that's awesome for breweries, right? Like a lot of folks made like really, really valuable connections with people who really, really love what they do. But as life speeds up again and people have, stuff to do, the ability to go out, they're going to have less time, and making those connections is not going to be as much of a, I did a live video and so people watched it.
Right.
It's going to be a lot more of like, how do you incentivize people to watch that?
We're not all going to be trapped in our homes indefinitely with one window into the universe through our phones.
Right. And so
all right.
That'd be my recommendation.
Well, Collin and Rob, we really appreciate the insight on that. I know there's probably a lot more nuance to uncover in distribution going into 2021, but most of it will not have complete answers to for a while yet. So I look forward to checking in with you guys again maybe this year as some of that data shakes out. Brian and Kate, thanks so much for your questions. Anybody who is interested in Sightlines in general, you can have conversations like this. You get the newsletter every week, sometimes a couple times a week. And we also have a pretty great little community of people that chat about these things all the time and what they're seeing in the market live. Go to goodbeerhunting.com/sightlines. That's where you'll find all of that information. You can sign up, and we would love to have you join us. Thanks, everybody, for spending your time with us today and chatting about that. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.
for having us.